Welcome back to Us Mint Mysteries, where every coin could be hiding a secret worth a fortune. Today, we're diving into the mysterious world of Canadian half-dollar coins, and trust me, you'll want to check your collection after this. Some of these rare pieces have shocked collectors, selling for prices you'd never believe, even reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So grab your magnifying glass, sit back, and let's uncover 10 ultra-rare US dollar coins that could turn an ordinary pocket find into life-changing treasure. And before we begin, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon, because you don't want to miss what's coming next. Our first treasure tonight takes us back to 1973, the era of bell-bottoms, gas shortages, and the mighty Eisenhower dollar. At first glance, this coin might seem like any other large, heavy dollar. But don't be fooled, the 1973 Ike dollar hides a secret that has stunned even veteran collectors. Now, what makes this coin special isn't just its bold image of President Dwight D. Eisenhower on the front or the majestic Apollo 11 eagle landing on the moon on the reverse. It's the mystery of its mintage. You see, in 1973, the US Mint decided not to release these coins for circulation. That's right, not a single 1973 Eisenhower dollar ever entered regular pockets or cash registers. Every single one was struck exclusively for collectors, sold in special mint and proof sets only. So if you happen to come across a 1973 Ike dollar outside of those sets, that's a major red flag that you may have something rare and valuable. Let's talk about condition, because that's where the excitement begins. In fine condition, these coins often show a bit of honest wear. Smooth hair details on Eisenhower, some light flattening on the eagle's wings. Even so, they can fetch around $30 to $60, depending on eye appeal. But the real magic begins as the condition improves. In uncirculated condition, brilliant 1973. Eisenhower dollar with the strong strike and lustrous surfaces can easily sell for $400 to $1,200, especially those taken straight from original mint sets and perfectly preserved. But hold on to your seat, because if you find a proof version with deep cameo contrast, flawless mirrors, and no marks at all, collectors have been known to pay up to $4,000 or more for pristine examples graded PR70 by PCGs or NGC. And then there are the errors, the true shockers of the Ike dollar series. Imagine finding a 1973 coin accidentally struck on a silver planchet from 1971 or 1972. That's a minting blunder so rare that only a few have ever surfaced, and when they do, they can bring jaw-dropping prices exceeding $450,000. Some have even been found with off-center strikes or double dies, where Eisenhower's portrait or the word "Liberty" appears double. These mint errors turn an already scarce coin into a six-figure collector's dream. So, how do you spot a potentially valuable 1973 Ike? First, check the edge. It should have that familiar copper-nickel sandwich look, unless you're holding one of those rare silver misstrikes. Next, inspect the surface for any doubling, missing letters, or odd coloration. Even the slightest hint of a minting error can dramatically boost the value. It's hard to imagine that a coin once overlooked in mint sets could now command prices that rival luxury cars. But that's the beauty of coin collecting. It's a treasure hunt that rewards the sharp-eyed and the lucky. Our next discovery is a coin that millions of Americans once held in their hands, yet very few ever looked at twice. The 1776 to 1976 Bicentennial Kennedy half dollar. It was struck to honor 200 years of American independence. But what most collectors don't realize is that some of these coins, even in what looks like ordinary fine condition, can hold secrets worth thousands, and sometimes far more. Take a close look at this one. The obverse features the proud, familiar face of President John F. Kennedy, a symbol of strength and hope for a generation. Flip it over, and you'll see Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the birthplace of the Declaration of Independence, standing tall with the dual dates, 1776-1976, beneath it. That design alone connects every collector straight to the heart of American history. Now, here's where the story gets fascinating. Most people assume these coins are common, and yes, the US Mint did produce hundreds of millions of them. But what many don't know is that 1976 marked the only time the Kennedy half ever carried a date other than the year it was minted. And even more interesting, there were actually two different versions of this coin struck that year. The first type was a clad composition, made of copper and nickel, just like most modern coins. In fine condition, like the one we're holding, this type usually sells for about $2 to $5, depending on how much wear it shows. But then there's the second kind, the 40% silver version. These were only made for collectors in special bicentennial sets, and they carry a completely different level of value. Even a fine condition silver bicentennial can bring $15 to $30, while uncirculated examples easily fetch $150 to $400, and if you happen to have a proof strike with mirror-like fields and deep cameo frosting, you're looking at $1,000 or more. But as with many US mint issues, the real thrill comes from the unexpected. That's right, mint errors. A small number of these bicentennial halves were accidentally struck on the wrong metal planchets, like blanks meant for quarters, or on leftover 90% silver discs from older years. Those mistakes are so rare that when one appears, it sends shockwaves through the collecting world. One example of a wrong planchet bicentennial half sold for an unbelievable $125,000, and others with dramatic off-center strikes, missing letters, or double die obverses have fetched well into the six-figure range. Collectors over 50 often remember these coins as a nostalgic keepsake from America's 200th birthday, but today, they're chasing them for a whole new reason: potential hidden fortune. Even in fine condition, it pays to inspect your coin closely. Look along the edge if it's solid silver rather than showing the copper core. That's your first clue you may have a rarer variety. Then, under a magnifying glass, check the words, "In God We Trust," and "Liberty" for doubling or irregular shapes. Even the faintest trace of doubling can turn a $2 coin into a jaw-dropping discovery. It's remarkable a $50 that once jingled in pockets during America's bicentennial now commands values rivaling high-end collectibles. Who would have thought that a 50-cent piece, struck nearly half a century ago, could one day be worth more than a luxury car? So before you spend or overlook that 1776 to 1976 Kennedy half, take a moment. Because what might seem like a simple commemorative coin could, under the right conditions, be your ticket to a once-in-a-lifetime payday. Now, don't let its age fool you. The 1972 Kennedy $50 might look like just another pocket coin from the 70s, but there's a hidden story here that every collector should know. Because this simple-looking coin can, under the right circumstances, be worth thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars. Take a closer look at it. In fine condition, you'll notice moderate wear across Kennedy's hair, cheek, and jawline, yet the design still shines through beautifully. Flip it over, and you'll see that proud presidential seal, the American eagle clutching arrows and an olive branch, surrounded by 50 stars. It's bold, powerful, and instantly recognizable. Now, here's where it gets interesting. By 1972, the mint had already removed all silver from the Kennedy $50. These were struck in copper nickel clad, the same metallic mix used for quarters and dimes. So yes, it's not a silver coin, but it's still one of the most collectible modern halves ever struck. Why? Because of one shocking mistake. In 1972, the US Mint used 3 different reverse designs during production, and one of them, known as the Type 2 reverse, became a legendary rarity. The Type 2 reverse has a small but powerful difference. On the globe under the eagle's claws, the lines between Florida and the islands of the Caribbean are missing, and the coast of Florida looks flat and featureless. Most people never notice it, but collectors, they go wild for it. This error only appeared on a small number of 1972 $50 struck at the Philadelphia Mint. No D mint mark below Kennedy's neck. And here's the shocking part. Fewer than 100,000 of these Type 2 varieties are believed to exist out of over 150 million 1972 halves struck. That's a microscopic percentage, and it makes this one of the most desirable modern US mint errors ever found. In fine condition, A normal 1972 Kennedy half is worth around $2 to $5, but if you happen to spot that rare Type 2 reverse, the value skyrockets. Even in well-circulated shape, it can bring $100 to $300. In higher grades, like uncirculated or mint state, collectors have paid $2,000 to $5,000, and in top-graded examples, certified by PCGs or NGC, some have sold for over $15,000 to $20,000 for a coin most people would overlook in loose change. And that's not all. The 1972 Kennedy half also produced several lesser-known but dramatic minting errors like off-center strikes, broad strikes, and double dies. These can range anywhere from $500 to $5,000, depending on the sharpness and severity. Imagine that a 50-cent coin from 1972 that could pay for a family vacation or even part of a new car. That's the kind of discovery that keeps coin hunters searching through every roll they can get their hands on. Now, let's talk history for a moment. By 1972, the Kennedy half dollar was already a symbol of nostalgia. Americans still remembered the tragedy of 1963, and the coin had become a quiet tribute, something too special to spend, yet too common to be rare. The irony? That very habit, people saving them instead of spending them, is what kept some of these rare varieties in pristine shape, ready to be discovered decades later. If you have a 1972 Kennedy half dollar in fine condition, look closely at that globe on the reverse under the eagle's claws. Compare it with images online of the Type 1, 2, and 3 reverses. If the Florida coast looks faint or missing, detail congratulations, you might be holding one of the rarest modern mint varieties in existence. Now, here's a coin that changed everything: the 1971 Kennedy half dollar. To most people, it's just another half dollar from the 1970s. But to serious collectors, this coin marks the beginning of a new era and a mystery that's still shocking treasure hunters today. Take a close look. In fine condition, you can see that proud, unmistakable portrait of President John F. Kennedy. His profile still clear, though worn slightly from circulation. The luster is faint but alive, especially across the cheek and hairline. Flip it over, and you'll see the American eagle, wings outstretched, gripping arrows and an olive branch, the symbol of peace and power, ringed by 50 stars. Even after decades of handling, it's a design that commands respect. But here's what most people don't realize. This coin, the 1971 Kennedy half dollar, was the first US half dollar ever struck without any silver. From 1964 through 1970, Kennedy halves were made with either 90% or 40% silver. But starting in 1971, the US Mint officially removed all silver from the series, switching entirely to a copper-nickel-clad composition. That change was huge. It ended America's silver coinage era forever. Now, that might sound like bad news for collectors. But here's the twist: the 1971 Kennedy half dollar still holds incredible potential value, thanks to one of the most shocking mint mistakes in modern history. When production began at the Philadelphia and Denver mints in 1971, the presses were supposed to use new copper-nickel planchets. But somehow, and to this day, no one knows exactly how a few leftover 40% silver planchets from 1970 slipped into the presses. Those rare errors were struck with the 1971 date and released into circulation before anyone noticed. And those mistakes? They're worth an absolute fortune. If you happen to find a 1971 Kennedy half dollar that weighs slightly heavier, around 11.5 grams, instead of the normal 11.34, you could be holding one of those rare silver transition errors. These have sold for $10,000 to $30,000 depending on condition. Some in top mint state grades have brought more than $50,000 at auction. That's right. A coin everyone thought was just clad turned out to hide silver worth a small fortune. Even without the silver, collectors love the 1971 issue because it represents the first year of the fully modern Kennedy half dollar. It's a defining piece in any Kennedy collection. Now, in fine condition, a standard 1971 half is worth about $2 to $5. mostly as a collectible rather than for metal value. But if you step up to mint state or proof-like examples, those values climb. A brilliant uncirculated 1971D with strong details and full mint luster can easily bring $25 to $50. But let's talk about errors, because this year produced plenty. There are double die obverses, where in God we trust, and liberty show slight doubling under magnification. Some of these have sold for $1,000 to $3,000. There are also off-center strikes and broad strikes, coins that slipped out of alignment during minting. These dramatic mistakes can bring anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 depending on rarity and condition, and perhaps the wildest find of all, a 1971 Kennedy half struck on a silver planchet authenticated by PCGs, sold for an unbelievable $66,000. Just imagine a coin that's been sitting in a change jar for 50 years. Could be worth more than a new car, but beyond the money, there's a powerful story here. By 1971, America had moved away from silver coinage, inflation was rising, and people were losing interest in the half dollar. Yet the mint continued producing Kennedy halves, year after year, to honor a president who still lived in the hearts of millions. Every coin struck was a quiet tribute, and today, it's a tangible piece of that history. Our next coin might just look like an ordinary pocket half dollar, but don't blink, because the 1983 Kennedy half dollar has shocked collectors again and again with its hidden secrets and unexpected value. At first glance, it's the classic design we all know and love. President John F. Kennedy's dignified profile graces the obverse, the same portrait Americans have cherished since 1964, symbolizing leadership, hope, and tragedy. Flip it over, and you'll see the presidential seal, the bold American eagle, clutching an olive branch and arrows, surrounded by 50 stars. It's one of the most patriotic designs ever struck by the U.S. Mint. Now, here's the twist. In 1983, the Kennedy half dollar wasn't something you'd find in your pocket change very often. That's because the mint didn't strike any of these coins for collectors. No special sets, no silver issues, nothing. Every single 1983 Kennedy half was made strictly for circulation, and yet, they hardly ever circulated. Most banks didn't even order them. As a result, finding a 1983 half dollar today, especially one that's been sitting in circulation for decades, is much harder than people think. In fine condition, this coin typically shows moderate wear, flattened hairlines on Kennedy's portrait, a bit of softness around the eagle's feathers. Even so, collectors pay anywhere from $3 to $10 just for a decent circulated example. That's already up to 20 times its face value. But the story gets far more interesting once you start looking for errors. You see, 1983 was one of those chaotic years for the US Mint, with misaligned dies, planchet flaws, and quality control problems all showing up in production. And because no proof or collector versions were made, every error that escaped the presses went straight into circulation, which means they're out there, hiding in the wild. One of the most famous is the 1983 double die obverse, where the words, "In God We Trust," and "Liberty" show clear doubling under magnification. Those can fetch $250 to $1,000 even in lower grades. Then there are off-center strikes and broad strikes, coins that were misaligned or expanded during minting. Those errors often sell for $500 to $3,000, depending on how dramatic they are. But the real jaw-dropper? A few 1983 Kennedy halves have been discovered, struck on planchets meant for foreign coins, or with the wrong metal composition. One famous example, a 1983 half dollar struck on a copper planchet, sold for over $30,000. And another, struck on a clad quarter planchet, brought nearly $50,000 at auction. These are the kinds of mistakes that keep collectors hunting for decades. It's worth noting that the 1983 Kennedy half is also special because of its history. The mint was still recovering from the silver shortages and production cutbacks of the late 70s. By the early 80s, half dollars had all but vanished from daily use. Yet the mint kept striking them as if to preserve the legacy of Kennedy's coin, even as fewer and fewer Americans saw one in person. So if you have a 1983 Kennedy half dollar in fine condition, don't underestimate it. Check the edge, it should show the copper nickel layers, but if it looks unusually silver toned or shows no copper core, get it checked immediately. Look closely for doubling on the lettering or misaligned designs. Even a small minting flaw can turn that 50-cent coin into a high dollar discovery. The truth is, the 1983 Kennedy half dollar isn't just another coin, it's a hidden relic from an overlooked chapter of mint history. And in the world of coin collecting, that kind of mystery always leads to treasure. So before you toss that 1983 half back into your change jar, take a second look, because you might be holding one of the most surprising sleeper coins of the entire Kennedy series. The next coin on our list takes us back to the turbulent year of 1968, a time of hope, loss, and change in America. And in the world of coinage, something incredible was happening at the US Mint. This coin right here, the 1968 Kennedy half dollar, may look ordinary, but it hides a story of silver, scarcity, and shocking collector value that could leave you speechless. Now, first, take a good look at it. Even in extra fine condition, this coin carries a warm silver tone with subtle luster still clinging to the high points. Kennedy's cheekbone, his hairline, and the proud eagle on the reverse. Every mark tells a story, a coin that's been handled, but not abused. It still has presence, dignity, and weight. Literally. Because this was the first year the Kennedy half dollar was struck at the Denver Mint in 40% silver after a 2-year break. That's right, 1968 marked the return of the half dollar to a silver composition, but with less silver than the early 1964 issues. Instead of 90, these coins were made with 40% silver, making them the last generation of silver-clad halves before the mint phased silver out completely in 1971. The design, of course, is timeless. Sculptor Gilroy Roberts' portrait of President John F. Kennedy on the obverse remains one of the most beloved in U.S. coinage, bold, proud, and instantly recognizable. The reverse by Frank Gasparro, featuring the presidential seal, gleams like a miniature emblem of national pride. But here's where things get really interesting. You see, the 1968 Kennedy half dollar, the only mint that produced halves that year, carries a small D mint mark just below Kennedy's neck. And that tiny letter can make a world of difference. Because even though more than 246 million were struck, very few survive today in pristine condition. Most entered circulation and were quickly worn down or melted for their silver content in the following decades. In extra fine condition, a 1968 half typically sells for around $10 to $25, not bad for a 50-cent coin. But if you move up to uncirculated or proof-like examples, the price can jump into the hundreds. Now, here's the kicker: rare error varieties from this year can reach jaw-dropping prices. The most famous is the 1968 Kennedy half dollar with the no FG reverse. The initials FG stand for Frank Gasparro, the coin's reverse designer, and they appear just below the eagle's tail feathers. But on certain rare strikes, those initials are completely missing due to over-polished dies. This small error transforms an ordinary half dollar into a collector's dream, with examples selling for $2,000 to $5,000, sometimes even higher. And if you happen to find one that's been graded in superb condition with full mint luster and that rare missing FG mark, you're looking at auction prices that can easily climb to $15,000 or more. But that's not the end of it. There have been reports of 1968 Kennedy halves struck on wrong planchets, like quarter-size blanks or foreign coin metal compositions. One of these incredible minting mistakes reportedly sold for over $70,000. And here's something most people don't know: the 1968 half dollar was also the first to carry a mint mark since 1965. From 1965 to 1967, the mint had removed mint marks entirely in an effort to discourage coin hoarding. So when that tiny D reappeared in 1968, it marked a symbolic moment, the rebirth of mint marks, and a sign that silver coinage was nearing its final chapter. Now, let's go back to 1967, year filled with music, moonshots, and major changes at the US Mint. And sitting quietly in the middle of it all was this: the 1967 Kennedy half-dollar, a coin that might look simple at first glance, but carries with it one of the most surprising and valuable twists in the entire Kennedy series. Take a moment and look at it closely. In fine condition, you can still see the proud outline of Kennedy's profile, though the high points of his hair and cheek have smoothed down a bit over time. The reverse still shows that majestic eagle, clutching arrows and an olive branch, wings spread wide, even if the details have softened from circulation. It's a coin that's seen history, yet still shines with a silvery glow. And yes, that's because it's made from 40% silver, one of the last American circulating coins to carry any real silver content. You see, the 1967 Kennedy half-dollar was struck during a turbulent time for American coinage. The mint was still adjusting after the nation's massive switch away from silver coins in 1965. Silver prices had skyrocketed, and people were hoarding anything that looked shiny or valuable. To stop the panic, the mint removed mint marks completely and reduced the silver content, but they didn't take silver out entirely for the half-dollar. That makes these coins incredibly special today. Now here's where the story gets exciting, because 1967 was the final year before the mint reintroduced mint marks. And that means every single one of these coins was struck without a mint mark. But not all of them were created equal. 1967 halves were made for circulation, but a small number, roughly 1.8 million pieces, were struck in special mint sets, known as SMS coins. These were not proofs, and not circulation strikes either. They were something in between: smooth surfaces, strong details, and that mesmerizing satin finish. And if you happen to find one of those hidden among ordinary change, you've hit the collector's jackpot. Now let's talk numbers, because this is where jaws drop. A typical 1967 Kennedy half-dollar in fine condition might bring around $5 to $10 simply for its silver value. But an uncirculated one with strong luster easily pushes $40 to $100. And if you have one of those rare SMS examples, especially one graded with deep cameo contrast, the price can rocket to $1,000, $2,000, or even more. But the real shockers, those headline-making finds, come from minting errors. The 1967 half-dollar is notorious for a few dramatic ones: struck through errors, off-center strikes, and planchet clips that can send values soaring. Some double-struck examples have sold for over $15,000, and coins struck on foreign planchets, yes, wrong metal entirely, have hit $50,000 plus at major auctions. Collectors are always on the hunt for these oddities. And since 1967 was a year of production chaos, it's one of the best hunting grounds for wild mint mistakes. You might be holding one right now without even realizing it. The historical side is equally powerful. Remember, by 1967, America was still mourning the loss of John F. Kennedy, whose tragic assassination just 4 years earlier had inspired this coin's creation. The half-dollar was meant to be a national tribute, a symbol of unity and pride. But because so many people hoarded the early silver versions, these later ones quietly slipped through circulation, often forgotten. And that's what makes discovering one today so thrilling, because you're not just finding silver, you're holding a piece of American history, a tangible reminder of an era of change, hope, and transition. So if you ever stumble upon a 1967 Kennedy half-dollar, don't overlook it. Check for any strange strikes, off-center designs, or odd coloration on the edge. Look closely, because even the smallest difference could turn your 50-cent coin into a $10,000 surprise. Now, here's a coin that most people overlook: the 1980 Kennedy half-dollar. At first glance, it might look like just another modern half, the kind you'd find in an old drawer or coin jar. But hold on, because this one hides more secrets than you'd ever imagine. In extra fine condition, this coin might just surprise you, and if you know what to look for, it could be worth far more than 50 cents. Take a close look at it. Even after decades of circulation, the 1980 half-dollar still holds that powerful image of President John F. Kennedy. his profile standing out with grace and confidence. The details of his hair are slightly worn, but visible, and there's still a hint of luster glinting across the fields. Flip it over, and you'll see the American eagle bold, fierce, and beautifully balanced, surrounded by the ring of 50 stars. It's more than a coin. It's a piece of living American history. Now, the 1980 Kennedy half-dollar marks a special turning point. This was the first year since 1976 that the P Mint mark appeared on U.S. coins, meaning for the first time ever. The Philadelphia Mint proudly stamped its initial right on Kennedy's neck, just below the bust. Before that, coins from Philadelphia carried no mint mark at all. So, if your coin has that small P, you're holding a numismatic milestone, a moment when the mint changed tradition forever. The coin itself was struck in copper nickel clad, meaning no silver, but don't let that fool you. Because in the world of coin collecting, rarity isn't just about metal, it's about mistakes, oddities, and survivors. In extra fine condition, a standard 1980 half-dollar might bring $2 to $5, but when you step into uncirculated grades, crisp, untouched surfaces with that glowing mint shine, values jump to $20 to $50. And that's just the beginning. Now, here's where the thrill begins. During 1980, both the Philadelphia and Denver mints produced millions of these halves, but production was fast and furious, and that's where the errors crept in. There are double die obverses, misaligned dies, off-center strikes, and struck-through grease errors that collectors hunt relentlessly. A beautiful example of a 1980 half with dramatic doubling on Liberty, or In God We Trust, can easily fetch $1,000 to $2,500. But a more dramatic error, say, an off-center strike showing part of the blank edge, or one struck on a foreign coin, planchet, those have brought $25,000, even $50,000 at major auctions. And the rarest of them all? A handful of 1980 Kennedy halves struck on pure silver planchets, likely leftover blanks from earlier commemoratives, have sold for nearly $75,000. What's fascinating about this coin is that it came at a time when the Kennedy series was quietly fading from circulation. By 1980, Americans hardly saw half-dollars in their change anymore. Banks didn't stock them, and businesses rarely used them. Yet, the mint kept producing them year after year, almost out of respect, keeping the legacy of Kennedy alive in silver-toned metal. That makes every 1980 half-dollar a silent survivor of its era. In extra fine condition, you'll often find soft wear across Kennedy's cheek, light flattening on the eagle's wings, and smooth edges, but no deep gouges or damage. These details matter because the sharper the design, the higher the collector appeal. Now, here's a tip for every coin hunter watching this. When you check your 1980 halves, look closely at the rim and edge. If you spot a coin that looks slightly heavier, duller in tone, or has a full silver edge without the typical copper line, get it tested. You could be holding one of those ultra-rare silver planchet strikes, worth more than some cars on the road today. Now, let's fast forward to the year 1993, a time when the Kennedy half-dollar was more of a collector's coin than a circulating one. People rarely saw them in their pocket change, and most assumed they were nothing special. But here's where it gets fascinating. The 1993 Kennedy half-dollar, even in fine condition, carries some hidden twists that could make it worth far more than 50 cents. And for a few lucky collectors, it's turned out to be a genuine jackpot find. Take a close look at it. In fine condition, you'll see moderate wear across Kennedy's cheek and jawline, but the design remains strong. The raised profile still carries that unmistakable dignity, the eternal tribute to a fallen president. On the reverse, the American eagle still holds its powerful stance, arrows and olive branch in its talons, the stars circling like a halo of freedom. By 1993, the half-dollar was no longer a coin of daily commerce. It was struck mostly for collectors and bank orders. The U.S. Mint in both Philadelphia and Denver kept producing them, but in relatively modest numbers compared to earlier decades. That lower mintage, combined with the fading popularity of half-dollars, makes the 1993 issue surprisingly scarce in higher grades today. Now, In fine condition, a typical 1993 Kennedy half might be worth $1 to $3. Modest. Yes, but remember, that's just the base. Because if your coin hides an error, the value can skyrocket into the thousands. Let's start with one of the most mysterious types, missing clad layer errors. These occur when one of the nickel layers fails to bond to the copper core, leaving one side with a strange coppery tone. A genuine example of a 1993 half with a missing clad layer can easily sell for $2,000 to $5,000, and in mint state, it can soar beyond $10,000. Then there are off-center strikes, where part of the design is missing or misaligned. Some of these dramatic minting mistakes where Kennedy's face appears shifted or cut off can fetch $7,000 to $15,000 depending on the degree of the error. But the real wow factor? A handful of 1993 Kennedy halves have been discovered struck on the wrong planchet coins intended for quarters, foreign coins, or even dollar blanks. These ultra-rare errors have stunned collectors, with confirmed auction sales reaching $35,000, even $50,000 for a single piece. And here's the catch: you can't spot these with the casual glance. You need to pay attention to weight. A normal 1993 half dollar should weigh 11.34 grams. If yours weighs less or more, it could be a wrong metal strike. Imagine the shock of realizing that an ordinary coin from 1993 could cover your next car payment or your next vacation. There's also a stunning proof version of the 1993 half dollar, struck only at the San Francisco Mint with a mirror finish. These coins were never meant for circulation and came only in proof sets. A standard proof sells for around $10 to $20, but a flawless, deep cameo example graded by PCGs or NGC can bring over $200 to $300, and rare double die proof varieties have fetched $2,000 plus at major coin shows. But even the ordinary 1993 Kennedy half has a charm all its own. It represents a moment when the mint continued a legacy, keeping Kennedy's image alive on a coin few people ever actually spent. By then, half dollars had all but disappeared from daily life. Yet the mint pressed on year after year, quietly striking millions of coins that would mostly vanish into rolls, bags, and collections. So if you ever come across a 1993 Kennedy half dollar, don't overlook it. Hold it up to the light. Look for missing clad layers, doubling in the lettering, or off-center strikes. Even in fine condition, it could be hiding a collector's treasure that's worth thousands. Because here's the truth: even the most modern coins can hold mysteries that the US Mint never intended to reveal. And that's why every collector knows the next ordinary coin in your change could be the one that makes history.